There are families that the world falls in love with not because they are perfect, but because they are real. The Pohl family is exactly that kind of family. For over a decade, millions of viewers around the world tuned in week after week to watch Dr. Jan Pohl work his way through the muddy fields of rural Michigan, delivering calves in freezing barns, stitching up farm dogs, and doing it all with a no-nonsense attitude and a grin that made everyone feel like they were watching their own grandfather at work. The incredible Dr. Pohl became more than a television show. It became a comfort, a ritual, something people watched with their children on Saturday evenings because it reminded them that hard work, compassion, and community still existed in the world. But behind that warm and familiar screen, the Pohl family has lived through pain that most of their viewers never fully understood. And at the center of some of that pain is the story of Charles Pohl, the adopted son of Jan and Diane Pohl, the man who took a family legacy rooted in veterinary medicine and turned it into a television institution. Charles's journey is not a simple one. It is layered with ambition, grief, resilience, and the kind of quiet heartbreak that does not make headlines but shapes a person forever. When you look closely at what Charles Pohl has endured, the word tragic is not an exaggeration. It is simply the truth. To understand Charles Pohl's story, you have to start at the very beginning because the beginning matters more than most people realize. Charles was born on March 6, 1979, in central Michigan. He was adopted as a baby by Jan Pohl and his wife Diane, and from the very first days of his life, he was welcomed into a household where love was not defined by bloodlines. Jan and Diane never treated adoption as something that needed to be minimized or explained away. They were open about it, honest about it, and most importantly, they made Charles feel that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Growing up as the son of a rural veterinarian in Michigan is not like growing up anywhere else. The Pohl household operated on its own schedule, one dictated not by school calendars or weekday routines, but by the needs of animals and the farmers who depended on them. The phone could ring at 2 in the morning because a mare was struggling through a difficult labor. Dinner conversations regularly included detailed descriptions of surgeries, infections, and farm emergencies that would make most people put down their forks. Charles did not just grow up around animals. He grew up inside a world where animals were central to everything, where the line between home life and professional life was almost non-existent. What this environment gave Charles was something that no classroom could have provided. It gave him exposure to real stakes. When Jan Pohl drove out to a farm at dawn to save a sick calf, the farmer's livelihood was on the line. When a family brought in their dog that had been struck by a car, their grief was raw and immediate. Charles witnessed these moments constantly. He learned early that the work his father did was not just a job. It was a form of service that carried genuine weight. And while Charles would eventually choose a very different path in veterinary medicine, those early lessons about responsibility, compassion, and showing up when people needed you would follow him for the rest of his life. Not every child of a famous or respected parent wants to follow in their footsteps, and Charles Pohl was honest enough with himself to recognize that veterinary medicine, as admirable as it was not where his heart lived. What fascinated Charles was storytelling. From a young age, he had a gift for holding a room's attention. He was the kind of person who could turn a mundane Tuesday afternoon into an entertaining story simply by the way he told it. He noticed things. He observed how people reacted to different kinds of narratives, what made them lean forward, what made them laugh, what made them feel something real. After finishing high school, Charles made the decision to pursue communications at the University of Miami. This was not a small choice. It meant stepping away from Michigan, away from the farm, away from everything that had shaped his childhood. Miami was a different world entirely. Fast, diverse, culturally layered in ways that rural Michigan simply was not. But Charles thrived in that environment. His coursework gave him structure and vocabulary for things he had always felt intuitively. He studied how media worked, how audiences processed information, how a well-constructed story could move people in ways that raw facts simply could not. After college came an even bolder move. Charles relocated to Los Angeles with the intention of building a career in the entertainment industry. Anyone who has ever tried to break into Hollywood knows that the city is not kind to dreamers who are not willing to do the unglamorous work first. Charles did that work. He took low-level positions, ran errands, handled logistics, sat quietly in rooms where important decisions were being made, and absorbed everything he could. He had the extraordinary opportunity to intern under Sidney Pollack, one of the most respected directors and producers of his generation. Working in that environment gave Charles a masterclass in how professional storytelling operated at the highest level. He learned how a director's vision filtered down through an entire production. He learned how the smallest creative decisions, the angle of a shot, the pace of a scene, the way a conversation was framed, could completely change the emotional impact of a story. These years in Los Angeles were formative in ways Charles probably did not fully appreciate while he was living through them. He was building a toolkit, and eventually, almost inevitably, he would find the perfect project to use it on. Somewhere along the way, Charles Pohl had a realization that many people who grow up around something extraordinary never have. He recognized that what his family did every single day was genuinely compelling television. Not in a manufactured, dramatic, reality show way, but in the most honest way possible. His father, Jan Pohl, was a character in the truest sense of the word. Confident, blunt, deeply skilled, and completely indifferent to pretense. Jan Pohl did not perform for anyone. He just worked. And Charles understood that in a television landscape crowded with scripted drama and manufactured conflict, that kind of authenticity was rare and valuable. Charles pitched the concept to National Geographic Wild. The idea was straightforward. Follow Dr. Jan Pohl and his family through their daily work at their rural Michigan veterinary clinic. No exaggeration, no manufactured tension, just the real thing. Executives were not immediately convinced. Rural veterinary medicine was not exactly what most television networks considered prime programming material. But Charles argued his case with the confidence of someone who had spent years in the industry learning how audiences think. He believed that viewers were hungry for something genuine, something that reminded them that meaningful, skilled, dedicated work still existed in the world. He was right. The incredible Dr. Pohl premiered in 2011 and became one of the most successful programs in National Geographic Wild's history. Viewers responded to it with an almost immediate and powerful affection. They loved Jan Pohl's directness. They loved Diane's warmth. They loved the cases, the animals, the farmers, and the community that the show revealed. Charles served as executive producer while also appearing on camera, and the dynamic between him and his father became one of the show's most beloved elements. Their conversations were real. Their disagreements were real. Their laughter was real. And that realness is what kept audiences coming back season after season. Charles had taken a world he grew up in and shared it with millions of people. It was a professional achievement of the highest order. But success, as anyone who has lived through genuine loss knows, does not protect you from grief. And grief was coming for the Pohl family in a way none of them could have anticipated. In September of 2019, the Pohl family received news that broke their hearts entirely. Adam James Butch, the 23-year-old son of Charles's sister Kathleen Butch, passed away unexpectedly. He was young. He was vibrant. By all accounts, he was deeply woven into the fabric of the Pohl family's life. He had grown up in and around the same world Charles had known, the same farm energy, the same family gatherings, the same sense of belonging that the Pohl household had always cultivated. And then, without warning, he was gone. The death of a young person is always devastating, but there is a particular cruelty to losing someone at 23, an age where life should be just beginning to open up. Adam had his entire adult life ahead of him. He had people who loved him profoundly, and his sudden absence left a wound in the family that nothing could quickly or easily heal. For Charles, the loss was both personal and complicated in ways that were difficult to articulate publicly. He was not just grieving his nephew. He was watching his sister go through one of the most devastating experiences a parent can face. He was watching his parents process the loss of a grandchild. He was holding the grief of his entire family while simultaneously trying to hold himself together. What made this period particularly painful was its timing. Professionally, The Incredible Dr. Pol was doing extraordinarily well. The show was reaching more viewers than ever, earning the kind of cultural recognition that television producers dream about. Charles had just recently become a father himself. His daughter Abigail had been born in 2019, the same year Adam passed away. The collision of joy and grief in that single year was almost incomprehensible. He was simultaneously experiencing the arrival of new life and the devastating departure of a young man who had meant so much to his family. There is no instruction manual for navigating that kind of emotional duality. Most people, when they're grieving, can step back from their professional obligations to some degree. They can take time, create space, allow themselves to feel what they are feeling without an audience watching. Charles did not have that luxury. The cameras kept rolling. The production schedule did not pause. Audiences expected the same engaging, warm, entertaining version of the Pol family that they had always seen. And Charles had to show up and deliver that, day after day, while carrying a grief that was invisible to everyone watching at home. What Charles Pol demonstrated in the months and years that followed Adam's death was a form of strength that rarely gets recognized because it is quiet rather than dramatic. It does not look like a rousing speech or a public declaration. It looks like getting up in the morning and doing the work. It looks like being present at a production meeting when your mind is elsewhere. It looks like answering the same interview questions with patience when the only thing you actually want to do is sit in a quiet room and cry. Charles channeled his grief into his work in subtle ways. He brought a deeper awareness to the show's storytelling, finding ways to highlight themes of resilience, care, and the fragility of life without making the program feel heavy or mournful. He understood that The Incredible Dr. Pol was, at its core, a show about people who showed up for others in their most vulnerable moments. Farmers calling the clinic in a panic. Families bringing in beloved pets with tears in their eyes. Jan Pol walking into situations that would unsettle most people and handling them with calm, steady competence. Those themes resonated with Charles in a new and deeper way after Adam's death. At the same time, he was becoming a father himself, learning the daily rhythms of caring for a child, the exhaustion, the wonder, the sudden awareness of how quickly time moves and how precious ordinary moments truly are. In 2021, he and his wife Beth welcomed their son, adding another layer of meaning and responsibility to his already full life. Parenting gave him something grief had temporarily taken away. It gave him a clear and immediate sense of purpose. His children needed him present, not just physically, but emotionally. And that need helped pull him forward on the days when moving forward felt impossibly hard. Beth Oakes, who Charles married in 2018, has been a genuine and consistent source of support throughout everything. Their relationship was built over years of friendship before it became a marriage, which gave it a foundation of real understanding rather than romantic idealism. Beth knew the Pol family well before she became part of it officially, and that familiarity meant that when the difficult seasons came, she was not surprised by the weight of them. She carried some of that weight alongside Charles, quietly, without fanfare, the way Real partners do. Being part of a beloved television family comes with a particular set of pressures that are easy to underestimate from the outside. Viewers develop a sense of ownership over the families they watch week after week. They feel entitled to opinions about how the family lives, how they parent, what choices they make, how they handle professional challenges. When The Incredible Dr. Pol attracted criticism from animal welfare advocates regarding certain veterinary procedures,